Another day, another story. Female pirates? Murderers? Gangsters? Conspirators? Yes. Throughout history, women have had their share in all of it. Here is a list of 7 notorious female criminals of the 17th through early 20th century who wreaked havoc on land and sea. Welcome to Tabo Eminent channel. Belle Starr. A Texas outlaw in the 19th century, Belle Starr, born Myra Belle Shirley, lived a bandit's life, associating with unsavory folk such as Jesse James. She and her husband, a Cherokee Indian named Sam Starr, were known for housing outlaws on their ranch in the Oklahoma Indian Territory and for preying on travelers and cowboys passing through. She and her husband were convicted of horse stealing in 1883 and served time in a federal penitentiary. She was charged with a handful of other crimes before being shot and killed on her ranch in 1889. The killer was never identified. Belle Starr, born Myra Maybelle Shirley, was an American outlaw and legendary figure of the Old West. Born in 1848, she gained notoriety for her association with various criminal activities and her relationships with several notorious outlaws of the time. Belle Starr was married multiple times, and she became involved with infamous figures such as Cole Younger and Jesse James. She was known to be a horse thief, and she participated in other illegal activities, including harboring and aiding wanted criminals. Despite her association with outlaws, the extent of Belle Starr's direct involvement in criminal activities remains somewhat unclear. In 1889, she was shot and killed under mysterious circumstances near her home in Oklahoma. The circumstances surrounding her death and the identity of her killer remain a subject of speculation and mystery. Belle Starr's life has been romanticized and mythologized in various books, movies, and songs, contributing to her status as a legendary figure of the American Old West. It's important to note that while she is often portrayed as a glamorous and daring figure, her involvement in criminal activities and associations with outlaws were part of a tumultuous and often violent period in American history. Maulcut Purse. Maulcut Purse, born Mary Frith, was notorious in 17th-century London. She began her life of crime as a common pickpocket. Then she expanded her territory and became a highway robber dressed in men's clothing. Finally, after a stint in jail, she opened a shop in London that she used as a cover for selling stolen items. Maulcut Purse, whose real name was Mary Frith, was a notorious figure in 17th-century London. Born around 1584, she gained fame for her unconventional lifestyle and involvement in criminal activities. Her nickname, Cut Purse, likely refers to her alleged skills in pickpocketing. Maul was known for challenging traditional gender norms of the time. She dressed in men's clothing and openly defied societal expectations for women. Would you like me to create a video similar to this one? Please feel free to leave a comment if you have any specific preferences or requests for content. Your feedback is important, and I'm here to tailor the content to your interests. Thank you for watching. She was often depicted smoking a pipe and engaging in activities typically associated with men. Despite her involvement in criminal activities, Maulcut Purse was a colorful and well-known character in London society. She was not only a pickpocket but also a fence, selling stolen goods. It is worth noting that her reputation was enhanced by theatrical and literary representations that portrayed her as a larger-than-life, cross-dressing, and roguish figure. Maulcut Purse's exploits were often exaggerated in popular culture, and she became a popular character in plays and ballads of the time. While the line between fact and fiction in her story is sometimes blurred, Maulcut Purse remains an intriguing and iconic figure in the history of London's underworld during the early 17th century. Anne Bonny. Anne Bonny was an Irish pirate who trolled the Caribbean Sea with pirate John, Calico Jack, Rackham in the 18th century. Rackham was wise to go against common thinking that women were bad luck on board a ship. Bonny and the crew had a successful run hijacking and pillaging merchant vessels. When they were captured in 1720, Bonny escaped execution because she was pregnant. When she was released, she went to live in South Carolina, where she proceeded to lead the rest of her life in an uneventful domestic fashion. Anne Bonny was an infamous female pirate who operated in the Caribbean during the early 18th century. Born around 1697 in County Cork, Ireland, Anne Bonny became one of the few well-known women who actively participated in piracy during the so-called Golden Age of piracy. Key facts about Anne Bonny include: piracy career. Anne Bonny gained notoriety for her involvement in piracy alongside the notorious pirate Calico Jack Rackham. She dressed as a man to conceal her identity while aboard the pirate ship. Relationship with Calico Jack. Anne Bonny was romantically involved with Calico Jack, and she sailed alongside him as a member of his crew. Another female pirate, Mary Read, was also part of their crew. Capture and trial. In 1720, Calico Jack's ship was captured by the British Royal Navy. Both Anne Bonny and Mary Read, the only other woman on the crew, were captured as well. During their trial, both women claimed to be pregnant, which temporarily spared them from execution. Fate. While Mary Read died in prison, there are varying accounts of what happened to Anne Bonny. Some reports suggest she may have been released and lived out her life in obscurity, while others suggest she escaped or was ransomed. Legacy. Anne Bonny has become a legendary figure in pirate lore. Her story has been romanticized and featured in numerous books, movies, and other forms of popular culture. Anne Bonny's exploits highlight the unconventional roles that some women played during the age of piracy, challenging traditional gender norms in a male-dominated world. Her life continues to capture the imagination of those interested in the history of piracy and the adventurous tales of the high seas. Charlotte Corday. Charlotte Corday became an assassin at age 25. The daughter of French nobles, Corday's allegiance during the French Revolution lay with Girondins, French Republican politicians, and the French Constitution. She took the conflict into her own hands and set her sights on Jean-Paul Marat, a leader of the French Revolution and enemy of all she stood for. Corday lied her way in to meet with Marat face-to-face and stabbed him to death in his bathtub on July 13, 1793. She was arrested and sent to the guillotine 4 days later. Charlotte Corday was a historical figure known for her role in the French Revolution. Born on July 27, 1768, in Saint-Saturnin-des-Ligneries, France, as Marie-Anne Charlotte Corday d'Armont, she became famous for the assassination of Jean-Paul Marat, a prominent Jacobin leader, on July 13, 1793. Key points about Charlotte Corday and her actions include: motivation. Corday was a supporter of the Girondins, a moderate political group during the French Revolution. She believed that by eliminating radical Jacobin leaders like Jean-Paul Marat, she could help prevent the escalating violence and restore a more moderate political course. Assassination. On July 13, 1793, Corday gained entry to Marat's residence by claiming she had information about Girondin conspirators. Once inside, she stabbed Marat, who was taking a medicinal bath due to a skin condition. Marat died shortly after the attack. Arrest and trial. Corday made no attempt to escape and was promptly arrested. At her trial, she admitted to the murder, stating that she had killed Marat to save the lives of innocent people. She was quickly convicted and sentenced to death. Execution. On July 17, 1793, just 4 days after the assassination, Charlotte Corday was executed by guillotine in Paris. Her actions and execution were seen as symbolic during a time of political upheaval. Legacy. Corday's act of violence did not have the intended impact on the course of the revolution, and the radical Jacobins continued to gain power. However, her actions elevated her to a symbol of resistance against the radicalization of the revolution. Some considered her a martyr for her perceived attempt to stop the violence. Charlotte Corday's assassination of Jean-Paul Marat is often remembered as a dramatic and tragic episode within the broader context of the French Revolution. Her act has been the subject of numerous artistic and literary works, contributing to her lasting legacy in history and culture. Mary Sarat. Mary Sarat ran a tavern with her husband in Maryland, where they welcomed Confederate soldiers during the American Civil War. When her husband died, Sarat moved to Washington, D.C., and opened a boarding house. The boarding house became a meeting place for John Wilkes Booth and his fellow conspirators. Sarat herself became entangled in the plot to kill U.S. Pres. Abraham Lincoln. She is thought to have been in regular conversation with Booth about his plans and assisted in concealing the weapons used for the murder at her tavern in Maryland. She was tried and found guilty of conspiracy and became the first woman to be sentenced to death by the United States. She was hanged with the other conspirators on July 7, 1865. Mary Sarat was a woman linked to the conspiracy to assassinate President Abraham Lincoln during the American Civil War. Born on May 1823, in Waterloo, Maryland, Mary Sarat became infamous for her association with John Wilkes Booth and others involved in the plot to assassinate President Lincoln. Key facts about Mary Sarat include: boarding house. Mary Sarat and her husband, John Sarat Sr., owned a boarding house in Washington, D.C. The boarding house became a meeting place for Confederate sympathizers, including John Wilkes Booth. Conspiracy to assassinate Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth, an actor and Confederate sympathizer, planned to assassinate President Abraham Lincoln. On April 14, 1865, Booth shot Lincoln at Ford's Theater. Earlier that day, Booth had visited Mary Sarat's boarding house. Arrest and trial. Following the assassination, authorities began investigating and identified Mary Sarat as having connections to the conspirators. She was arrested on April 17, 1865, along with several others. Mary Sarat was the first woman to be executed by the United States federal government. Trial and execution. Mary Sarat faced a military tribunal rather than a civilian court. She was found guilty of conspiring to assassinate President Lincoln. On July 7, 1865, Mary Sarat was executed by hanging at the Old Arsenal Penitentiary in Washington, D.C. Mary Sarat's story is a tragic and controversial part of American history, intertwined with the dramatic events surrounding President Lincoln's assassination and the aftermath of the Civil War. Her case has been the subject of various books, films, and discussions about justice and due process during times of national crisis. Ma Barker. Kate Ma Barker led the Barker Gang of her sons and rose to infamy as the FBI's public enemy number one. She and her gang orchestrated a slew of robberies, murders, and kidnappings throughout the American Midwest during the early 1930s. On January 16, 1935, she and her son Fred met their deaths in what was the longest shootout in FBI history, in the home that they had made their hideout in Florida. Ma was the subject of the 1970 movie Bloody Mama starring Shelley Winters. Bonnie Parker. Half of the legendary duo Bonnie and Clyde, Bonnie Parker met Clyde Barrow in 1930, and, when he was sent to jail soon after on burglary charges, she smuggled in a gun that he was able to use to escape. She partnered with Barrow in 1932 during the Great Depression in what became a 21-month-long crime spree. The two stole cars and robbed gas stations, small-town banks, and restaurants throughout Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Missouri. They evaded the FBI and the police until 1934 and in the process set free 5 prisoners from Eastham State Prison in Texas, killed 3 police officers, and kidnapped a police chief. They were eventually caught and killed by the police in Louisiana when a friend revealed their whereabouts. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.